They showed up to clean the beach, just 12 teens with gloves and trash bags. By sunset, they were gone. No screams, no signs of struggle. Only their phones, backpacks, and water bottles left scattered near the tide. And one survivor, found weeks later, who refuses to speak about what he saw. The town of Port Haven wasn't much more than a stretch of coastal road lined with cottages, a few mom-and-pop shops, and a single long pier that reached into the Pacific like an old, weathered finger. Every summer, it saw a small uptick in tourism. Families seeking a quieter slice of beach and volunteer groups hoping to combine good deeds with ocean air. That's what brought them here. 10 teenagers, aged 15 to 17, part of the Clear Coast's youth outreach. They arrived in a chartered van with 2 adult chaperones, ready for a day of cleanup and sunshine. The beach they were assigned was called Drift Point, a more secluded stretch of shore about 5 miles north of town. It was only accessible by a winding dirt path that started at a gravel turnout just off Route 1. Most locals didn't go there. It was rocky in parts, overgrown in others, and often foggy in the mornings. But it was scenic and quiet, which made it perfect for a cleanup drive. The group had arrived at 8:15 a.m., according to security camera footage from a nearby trailhead ranger station. The kids laughed and joked, hauling canvas bags and gloves, wearing matching Clear Coast t-shirts. They carried snacks, water bottles, and a Bluetooth speaker playing soft indie rock. By 9 a.m., the group had disappeared down the path toward the shore. At 4:40 p.m., the van was still parked in the turnout. A park ranger doing a routine patrol noticed that it hadn't moved and walked down the trail to check on the group. What he found was unsettling. Near the edge of the sand, laid out in a neat semicircle on a bright blue tarp, were 10 backpacks. Beside each one, a pair of shoes, water bottles, phones, half-eaten granola bars. The Bluetooth speaker, still playing music at a low volume. But not a single person in sight. The ranger called for backup immediately. When the first responders arrived, they scanned the beach from one end to the other. The tide was coming in, but it had been low most of the afternoon. No footprints led into the water. The sand was mostly undisturbed beyond the area where the belongings were left. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no tire tracks or boat marks. It was as if they had simply evaporated. By sunset, panic had spread across Port Haven. Parents began arriving at the site, frantic and confused. Local news crews parked their vans just off the highway, interviewing neighbors and friends. The police established a perimeter. Drones were launched. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach. Still nothing. The official missing persons report was filed that evening. 10 teenagers, 2 chaperones, no witnesses, no signals from their phones, just the eerie, unexplained discovery of their gear, left behind like an abandoned campsite. Everyone agreed on one thing: they wouldn't have willingly left their phones. And none of them had come back for them. The search teams mobilized before dawn the next morning. Port Haven's police force, bolstered by county deputies, volunteer firemen, and a Coast Guard response unit, set up a command post at the turnout by Drift Point. Maps were taped to the side of the ranger station wall, coffee brewed constantly, and radios buzzed with updates. A grid search of the beach began at first light. Boats scanned the waters just offshore. A K-9 unit combed through the nearby coastal woods, but the dogs seemed restless, constantly pulling off track, as if catching something and then losing it. It didn't help that Drift Point was known for its strange geography. The beach was flanked by jagged cliffs on one side and dense, marshy trees on the other. Fog rolled in and out unpredictably, thick enough to blur sightlines even in daylight. Locals had their stories, of course. Drift points always had weird energy, one old fisherman told reporters. Tides act funny. Sometimes the birds just go quiet, like they're listening to something we can't hear. By noon, dive teams were in the water. Nothing. They checked caves cut into the cliffs by centuries of erosion. All were shallow, damp, and empty. Drones scanned the area with infrared. Helicopters circled overhead. But no one found so much as a footprint past the tarp where the group's belongings had been left. Sheriff Dana Molina, who had served the county for 2 decades, held a press conference that afternoon. She kept her tone calm but admitted the situation was deeply troubling. She confirmed the group had signed in at the ranger station, that all 10 kids had parent waivers, and that 2 experienced adult supervisors had accompanied them. All standard, all expected. What wasn't expected was how completely they had vanished. Then came the first strange discovery. A volunteer firefighter, searching a narrow trail near the cliffs, found a water bottle resting upright on a flat rock. It was identical to the ones the kids brought, but this one had a piece of paper inside, folded small, stuffed into the neck. On it, a few words scrawled in thick black marker. "We thought it was just a story. That was it." No names, no explanation. The handwriting was rushed, uneven. Analysis later revealed it was written with one of the permanent markers from the group's cleanup supply kit. Theories exploded online overnight. Runaway, cult involvement, trafficking. One local YouTuber claimed it was part of a coastal ritual. Another claimed it was a hoax to promote a horror movie. But for the families waiting in town, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the silence. By the end of day 2, every expert brought in agreed. This wasn't a standard missing persons case. There were no exit points, no signals, no bodies, just a group of 10 teens and 2 adults who had walked down to a beach and left everything behind. And the note, the media presence in Port Haven swelled. Satellite trucks parked near the beach entrance. Reporters loitered outside the sheriff's office and the homes of the missing teens. News anchors called the case the Drift Point disappearance. Hashtags surged. Parents were bombarded with interview requests they mostly refused. The town, once sleepy and private, now felt like the center of a storm. But despite all the attention, there were no answers. That's when the rumors started, not from outsiders, but from locals. First came Mrs. Penner, a retired librarian who lived just 2 streets from the marina. She told the sheriff's office, quietly and without fanfare, that she'd seen something the night the teens disappeared. She couldn't sleep. A bad storm was rolling in, and the wind rattled her shutters. At about 1 a.m., she walked out to her back porch, which overlooked the eastern side of Drift Point in the distance. "I saw lights," she said. "Not flashlights, not car beams. Something bluish-white, hovering just above the waterline near the cliffs. They flickered like signals. Then they were gone." Her statement wasn't released publicly, but it spread quickly. Then a teenager came forward, Caleb Vance, 17, who hadn't joined the beach cleanup but had driven past Drift Point that same afternoon. He said he saw the group gathered in a circle near the rocks at the far end of the sand. "They looked like they were arguing," he told reporters. "Or maybe one of them was leading something. I didn't think much of it. Just assumed they were planning who cleaned what." Police later confirmed Caleb's statement placed him near the site around 4:30 p.m. About an hour before the last photo was timestamped on one of the phones found in the pile. That photo, released by the families in hopes of a lead, showed most of the teens laughing and making faces. Nothing suspicious in their expressions. Just another day at the beach. But internet sleuths weren't satisfied. They zoomed in, picked apart the photo pixel by pixel. In the far left, near the cliff edge, someone noticed a blur. Something dark and thin, like a figure caught mid-step. Others pointed out the shadow didn't match the angle of the sun. Still others believed it was just a smudge on the lens. The sheriff's department refused to comment on online theories. Meanwhile, back at Drift Point, searchers began reporting a strange pattern. Birds and small animals, seagulls, raccoons, even crabs, avoided the exact stretch where the belongings were found. A line in the sand, almost too precise, where nothing crossed. Some claimed their dogs whined and refused to enter that zone. By day 4, a new item was found. A red bandana tied tightly around the lowest branch of a twisted pine tree about 100 feet inland. One of the volunteers, Mateo Ruiz, was known to wear one just like it. His mother confirmed the design matched. It was too clean to have been there long. No signs of weathering, mud, or fading. It was as if someone had placed it there recently. But who and why? That night, a brief flare was reported offshore. A single red glow, like a distress signal, lasting no more than 6 seconds. The Coast Guard responded within the hour. Nothing. No boats. No swimmers. No wreckage. Only the sound of the waves and the mist pulling back in. 8 days after the disappearance, just as hope had begun to fade into memorials, something changed. At 5:42 a.m., a call came into the sheriff's department. A jogger had found a teenage boy wandering barefoot along Route 16, roughly 9 miles inland from Drift Point, disoriented, shirtless, sunburned. When paramedics arrived, he couldn't say his name at first, just mumbled fragments of words, mostly in whispers. But when they gently pressed him for more, he finally looked up and said one sentence. "I was with them." The boy was Elias Monroe, 16, part of the cleanup group, missing for over a week. At Port Haven General Hospital, he was treated for dehydration, multiple insect bites, and minor abrasions on his feet and arms. But the doctors were more worried about his mind. Elias flinched at sudden noises, barely made eye contact, and often curled into himself when asked basic questions. His parents rushed to his side, tears flooding down their cheeks, but even they struggled to get more than a few clipped sentences from him. Eventually, after several hours and under careful guidance from a trauma psychologist, Elias began to speak. He remembered going to the beach with the others, remembered laughter, picking up trash, and hiking toward the cliffs as the afternoon waned. He recalled someone, maybe Nadia or Jordan, pointing out something strange in the trees just above the tide line. A clearing like a trail that hadn't been there before. They followed it. It was narrow, almost hidden, he said, and it went up and around. Elias described what sounded like a short hike inland. Trees grew thicker. The air got colder. They found an old foundation of something. Stones, moss-covered, the remnants of a building long gone. At first, they thought it was just a cool spot to rest. Then everything changed. There was a sound, like, not loud, but it got inside your head, Elias said. And light, not bright, but like the colors weren't right. And we couldn't leave. He broke down after that. Doctors sedated him for the night. Detectives immediately dispatched teams to search for the site he described. They fanned out from Drift Point's upper trail system, combing the forest inch by inch. But no old foundations were found. No unnatural clearings. No disturbed ground. What investigators did find, however, shook them. About 4 miles into the dense woods, near the edge of what used to be part of an abandoned state park boundary, they located a second cluster of items. A pair of muddy sneakers, a plastic water bottle with Mateo's name on the side, and, buried under leaves, a scratched phone. It was confirmed to be Nadia Chen's. The phone was damaged, but the tech unit managed to extract fragments of video. The clip was under 30 seconds. Grainy, poor audio. It showed the teens walking single file through trees. Nadia was filming from the back. Someone ahead of her was whispering, "It's just up here." Then a strange echo, like wind, but deeper. One of the boys turned around, mouth open to speak, and then the video cut off abruptly. The sheriff's department didn't release it to the public, but parents were shown. Some broke down completely. Others demanded to know why the footage hadn't been found earlier. Meanwhile, Elias remained in recovery. He spoke little, mostly in short sentences or drawings. One sketch showed the forest trail. Another depicted a jagged shape, a figure, perhaps, or a large stone with something carved on it. He claimed it watched them, that it didn't want them to leave. He still didn't explain how he managed to, or why he was the only one who did. In the weeks that followed Elias Monroe's return, Drift Point remained sealed to the public. Officially, the sheriff's department cited ongoing investigation and safety concerns. But in private conversations, those between exhausted detectives, national park officers, and even a federal agent who arrived unannounced from the Department of the Interior, the tone was far more uncertain. The woods didn't feel right. Tracking dogs refused to go beyond certain spots. Drones lost signal. And the few officers who camped overnight near the cliff line reported strange auditory anomalies. Faint music, voices on windless nights, radio static that didn't match any frequency. Elias was moved to a secured therapeutic center near Portland. His condition improved slightly, enough for him to participate in short interviews. But each time investigators pressed for more details about what happened after they entered the forest, his answers grew vaguer. Sometimes he'd pause mid-sentence and shake his head. Once, when asked directly why the others didn't come back, he said, "They're not gone, just not here." Not really. Theories swirled online, from cult abductions to hidden caves to mass hysteria. But none explained how a dozen teenagers could vanish in daylight with no trace, no noise, and no struggle, only to leave their belongings behind like they'd simply stepped away. One final lead emerged in early August. A local fisherman, hiking near the northern bay, reported hearing voices, children laughing, echoing from the beachside woods near dusk. He followed the sound for about 20 minutes before coming upon a small clearing, newly disturbed earth at its center, and what looked like a weathered wooden sign half buried under vines. It read, "Port Haven Camp for Youths, EST 1947, place no one remembered, no records matched it, and no one could explain why the ground still smelled faintly of burned plastic." The sheriff's department quietly removed the sign. Port Haven School District retired the volunteer beach program indefinitely. Memorial plaques were installed at the main entrance, each etched with the names of the 12 missing teens. Nadia, Mateo, Jordan, Lynn, Beck, Savannah, Anthony, Kayla, Dev, Theo, Jessa, and Leah. A 13th name, Elias Monroe, was included on a separate plaque marked "Returned." Some questioned the decision. But Elias never did. He simply stood before the marker one morning during a supervised visit, stared for several long minutes, and said, "I hear them sometimes, in dreams, still out there, still waiting." Then he turned back toward the car, and never looked behind him again.